but they affect our families. And in this case, they affected 150,000 employees of this company. The conflict has such huge costs when it's pursued destructively. But when we can turn it around, when we can transform it into constructive engagement, constructive conflict even, constructive conversation, collaboration, then the rewards are enormous.
Are you still in touch with him?
Yes, I am. I just was talking with him yesterday.
Oh, cool. And he's still doing great?
Oh, he's doing fantastic.
So the balcony requires a lot of work. Would you recommend not waiting until we're embroidered into or pulled into or sucked into a conflict?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are a lot of tools that we can know. I think there are daily practices that can help us. Because first of all, every day we're negotiating whether, it may be small things. It may not be a huge conflict we're embroidering. But, when I ask people, if I define negotiation very simply and very broadly as the act of back and forth communication, you're trying to reach agreement with someone. Who do you negotiate with? They say, well, my kids, my spouse, my partner, my friends, my colleagues, my coworkers, my boss, my employees, my customers. It's everyone. And of course, then they say, and myself. And they say, so how much time do you spend negotiating? And people say, 50%, 75%. So the wonderful thing about this is that we get to practice every day. So we can practice going to the balcony every single day. And it could be everyone has their own practices. Some people meditate, for example. That helps. You go to kind of place of clarity. Even meditation doesn't have to be like sitting for 30 minutes. It could be just sometimes 30 seconds. Just taking a little moment of silence. Like I find it useful sometimes just before I'm pick up the phone or I'm about to do an email, just to take a few seconds by myself, just to listen to myself, clear my mind, and remember what my intention is. And it doesn't have to take a lot of time, but everyone will develop their own favorite practices for even in the midst of a conversation. Sometimes when you find yourself getting reactive, particularly in a conflictual situation, the ability to take a quick break. Hey, let's take a coffee break, tea break, whatever it is, or even just take a quick breath. Take a breath. Breathe for a moment. Well, that brings oxygen back to your brain. You can kind of think more clearly. So people have any number of techniques. I remember Thomas Jefferson, for example, during the Constitutional Convention, when everyone, it was a hot summer, steamy summer in Philadelphia, and tempers were rising. He would always say, when angry, count to 10. If very angry, 100. So simply because he knew, physiologically, which is true, that if you just wait a second, your physiology calms down and you can kind of see a path more clearly forward.
You know what, Dr. Uri? I just realized that there's another form of going to the balcony, and that's with I was just describing to you offline a little bit, my father has Alzheimer's. Well, part of his brain, his filtering brain, is kind of not really present as it was. And so for caretakers, for caregivers, it seems to be very, very important for caretakers especially to go to the balcony and to observe ourselves and to see how we are coming across, and because it's not necessarily a conflict situation with Alzheimer's patients, but it has a lot to do with agendas, sure. Because the best agenda is not necessarily the agenda that they want at the moment. So, but it's a lot about energy that we're carrying and how we're presenting ourselves as caretakers or caregivers.
That's it. No, this is a kind of a fundamental life skill. And when I think of negotiation, I don't think of it always as conflict. It's just like you just interact whenever you're interacting with a human being. You're in a broad sense of the term. You're negotiating. And yes, balcony is because in a situation like that, it's very easy for us to get reactive, to get frustrated, to have some kind of judgment that the person should act in a different way than they're acting. So the ability to take breaks, even like taking a break, is okay. Take a break. Just go outside. Just whatever it is that you use. I love. I mean, one reason why I love to live here in balcony in Boulder is this is my balcony. Is these mountains, whatever. Because I work on a lot of world conflicts, but I just love to be able to go out for a walk and in nature. It just gives me a perspective that I can then bring back to some heated situation.
Wow. This balcony is and can take many forms, and it's limited to our creativity to find how many balconies that we can take.
That's it.
I want to share with you, since I talked with you last, I think it was March, I was on the road, and I was discussing with you, and you were sharing with me about the balcony, and your book was fairly newly released. I participated in a conflict resolution training program and trauma program, and so I did the conflict facilitation, and I took the balcony part and I worked it in such a way of a visualization so the people can visualize themselves on stage with the other individual. So I had them stop, play without sound, just so they could really see themselves and invite them to come up, and I played with it and walked around themselves as they were involved with the conflict and watched at their face and then go on the other perspective, look at their face from behind the other individual, and then at the end I had them place their face on the other individual.
Wow, how beautiful!
It was gorgeous.
Yeah.
And they came back.
This is all visualization.
Visualization. Just had them shut their eyes, and I kind of walked them through it, and the feedback was absolutely fantastic. And it was one of the most important pieces of that workshop. And that's to recognize you for this work and in this book. So
we're all in this together, and I'm really delighted to see you taking it and kind of being creative and trying to think of how can you make it come real for people in their situations. That's a beautiful example of a creative technique to allow people to go to the balcony.
Yeah, and I guess what the fun part is that we did enough stuff, like stopping, rewinding, so they got the sense that they were in charge of it, that it was not necessarily in charge of them. So their emotional charge dissipated over time, so they can start observing, the neck muscles and the eyes and how you look. Do you look inviting?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. No, that's exactly it.
It was so cool.
Yeah. Now, the thing is, what's amazing is we have so many capacities like that, including the capacity to observe, or the capacity to empathize, put ourselves in the shoes of the other, which are key capacities for dealing with difficult situations with other human beings. And we kind of let them lie fallow. We don't take advantage of those. We don't tap into those capacities, because it's not like you have to learn something you don't already have. You have to discover something you already have. Is really what this is. All of us have an innate ability to go to the balcony, have an innate ability to put ourselves in the other side's shoes, and we just need to cultivate it.
Rediscovering, in a sense. We're just rediscovering something.
Rediscovering our talents and our capacities, powers.
I was talking with you also in the same conversation last year, and I was saying that I was at a point in my life of not wanting to go to war, not wanting to go into conflict with my own self. And then you mentioned a very intriguing idea I just loved, and it stayed with me. And it was, you mentioned coming around the breakfast table, inviting all the voices to the breakfast table. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, it's a way to, in negotiation, we talk about the importance of putting yourself in the other side's shoes. And what I find is equally important, or maybe the step beforehand, is to put ourselves in our own shoes. And one way to do that is what I like to do is, as a kind of an exercise, is when I wake up in the morning, is to imagine, visualize, that I'm at the breakfast table and the different voices that show up. For example, the voice of anxiety of, oh, I've got all this to do today. How am I going to do it? Give that voice a seat at the breakfast table. In other words, include it instead of, and every other internal voice that might come up, just include it, and then watch from a balcony perspective, from the point of view of the observer, just watch the conversation. And what I find is that gives me the ability to listen to those voices without necessarily being controlled by those voices. And so I call it, this breakfast table conversation, just the kitchen table, just sitting around the kitchen table.
It's kind of cozy.
Yeah, kind of cozy, and just give everyone a seat, including, there's one of the strongest voices in me and in everyone, I think, is the judge. It's kind of the self-critic. So judge, have a seat. You're gonna have a seat. Then you can listen to them, and then from that conversation, it will help you understand yourself better, but it will also help you distance yourselves from those voices, but at the same time include them. You're not rejecting them. You're giving them a seat at the table, and you're able to observe it. So you're able to not necessarily, fall into the trap of being the judge, or fall into the trap of being, anxious about the to-do list.
Well, I don't know if the judge is really comfortable at the breakfast table, because part of its energy is to work the background.
Yeah, it's true. It's true, and that's why. But I find that if you can recognize it, ask yourself, if you can recognize the judge and name the judge. Oh, okay, that's the and without. The thing is, what I find sometimes what we do, and what I found in the beginning of this process is, I would judge the judge. But when you judge the judge, you're still the judge.
Yes.
That's just, so the only, you have to use a little bit of jujitsu on the judge. You have to kind of accept the judge. And that's, because otherwise the judge, as you're right, sort of steals into the background and starts to control everything, So you have to kind of reclaim who you are, which is something bigger than the judge.
Yeah. I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine. Went for a walk here in Boulder. Oh my gosh, how inspirational is this? We were talking about the higher self, lower self. Lower self meaning more ego, initiatives, drives, and the higher self, more of a spiritual component. And he brought something to my attention. He says, well, in between, there's a non-judgmental piece that really deserves to be looked at. His name is Mark Azoulay. He's a psychotherapist here, and wonderful man, does contemplative work. And that is it. Because, here, my failure, listen to me, is that, it's easy to identify the ego as the culprit of most everything. However, the higher spirit, it's so easy to be, the spirituality component, the higher self, can be equally as ego-driven.
Yeah.
And it is so healthy to be able to see that non-judgmental piece that kind of is in between or focusing. So this breakfast table is very, very healthy exercise.
That's it. That's exactly it. No, that's it. Because sometimes, if you call it the higher self, for example, very easy to, the element of pride to come in. Okay, I'm the higher self, and so it's like it's very easy and for the ego very subtly to reemerge in even the highest and most noblest kind of cause.
Yeah.
And I often find this too, and even in working in organizations that like peace organizations and so on. Well, we're the peaceful ones, and then what is it? Then they get kind of collective ego, and they're the warmongers, and you start to replicate actually the same problems of dividing people, judging people. And so this is why going to the balcony is so important, is because you have got to be able to observe the subtle ways in which conflict patterns. We fall into the same conflict patterns, even thinking that we're somewhere above them.
Sure. No, I totally understand.